But when we look at the Bible in Matthew 6:9, Jesus says that you should pray like this. Our Father in heaven, hallowed or holy be your name. Our Father. So we address God as our Father, which is really a powerful idea that the God of the universe, the one who created heaven and earth, the one who formed the mountains and the seas, is telling us you can address me or call me your Father. You're my child. That's powerful. But also this other moving thing, because Father's Day is often hard because earthly fathers are sometimes, well, we're all flawed. Like I'm a father and I'm flawed, right? Like I'll make mistakes. And so sometimes we may have fathers who made mistakes, right? We might have a hard relationship with our dads. Or maybe fathers who aren't around as much as we would want them to be. We don't see them as much as we want to. And so that's difficult too. That's a difficult thing to understand. It's a difficult thing to reckon with. It's hard to experience this where we feel maybe a brokenness between our relationship with our Father. But here's this powerful phrase from Psalms where the psalmist says, Father of the fatherless. This is God. Father of the fatherless. Protector of widows is God in his holy habitation. So we understand even though our earthly fathers may be flawed and make mistakes, sometimes cause hurt and pain, God is our perfect heavenly Father. God is the one who is all wise, all loving. He's perfectly good. He is our perfect heavenly Father. And so we understand our earthly fathers, and if you know the love of an earthly father, you understand that God's love is 100 times more than that. And he is perfectly loving, perfectly kind. So we're going to look at this idea of God being our Father today through the story of the prodigal son. So you may have heard this story of the prodigal son. Jesus tells this parable, this story, to illustrate a point about who God is and how he is like our Father. So we're going to walk through this story in Luke chapter 15, 11 through 32. So in Luke 15, 11, Jesus says this. He said, there was a man who had 2 sons. And the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the property that is coming to me. And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had, took a journey into a far country, and there he squandered his property in reckless living. So maybe just understand how this works, right? You all know how an inheritance works? Yeah, so you have parents, and they give their money, their possessions to their children when they die, right? Well, in the Bible times, inheritance worked a little bit different because they didn't have bank accounts. Instead, they owned camels, right? Or they owned land. And so what they would do is they would give most of the inheritance, the large part of the inheritance, to the older child, and to the younger, because they would give the land and the possessions and all the livestock. And then to the younger children, they would get, just some money. They would still get inheritance, but it'd be a lot smaller. So this is what this younger son was saying. He looked at his father and said, okay, I want my inheritance now. You're not dead or anything, but I want it now. It's almost like he's saying, Dad, I kind of wish you were dead. This is what the son was saying to his father. Father, I kind of wish you would just be dead and gone so that I could get my money and I could live my life the way I want to live my life. That's brutal. Like that is brutal for a younger son to dishonor his father. And then not only does he dishonor the father by saying, I want my inheritance right now, give it to me now, but he dishonors him even more by taking that money, going into a different country, and just wasting it. He doesn't build a business. He doesn't, buy a few cows to start, getting milk and selling it, right? Like he just takes the money and wastes it in a different country. So you can imagine the pain and the brokenness that exists between this younger son and his father. The pain of the father watching his younger son reject him, rebel against him, run away with all the money. The pain from the community, as the father is probably shamed for having a son that would do this to him. So you have all of these pieces going into the story. It's just a complicated, messy, broken family that Jesus is talking about. But let's see what happens to the younger son. So the younger son, he takes all the money, he squanders it, and when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in the country. A severe famine. And he began to be in need. Right? He didn't have any money, didn't have any food. Everybody was hurting, so he lost everything. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country who sent him into the fields to feed pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. We don't want to rush over this part. Have you ever been around pigs before? Anybody been around pigs? I grew up kind of in the country of Delaware, the countryside, and so I know what it's like to be around pigs. Pigs, we all know, are very messy, right? Very dirty. They live in the mud. They live in the filth. Not only that, we know pigs eat slop. They eat the corn husk that we take away, everything we don't want to eat, that we take all the good food, we give all the scraps to the pigs, the banana peels, the apple peels, all the worst parts of the food we give to the pigs. And this guy was saying, I am so hungry, I'd eat this slop from the pigs. So he was destitute. Now, it seems like his family came from wealth, right? It seems like they were living comfortably. And here he had rejected his father, said, I don't want to be in your house anymore. I want that money that I got. He wasted all, and now he's in poverty. He's experiencing the pain of his choices, the pain of his own choices. But he comes to a realization. He kind of wakes up a little bit. It says, but when he came to himself, which is I always find funny, right? It's almost like he's in this daze. Like he's in like a fantasy land where he can take this money from his dad, go and live however he wants, and just be okay. Right? Like he's in this kind of fantasy of like, oh, if I just reject everything that my father wanted, if I just rebel against my family, if I just leave everything, I'll be great. And so he comes to himself. He's like, what am I doing? He said, how many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread to eat, but I perish here with hunger? He says this, I will rise, go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven, and before you, I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. So he had a speech prepared. He's like, look, I'm going to go home. Why? Because I'm eating slop, and my father's hired servants, the ones that do the laundry and clean the house and take care of the livestock, they eat bread every day. Like they eat the good stuff. So he comes to this realization, then he has the script prepared. He's like, I'm going to say, I'm going to say that I sinned. I'm going to say I messed up. I'm going to say I'm not worthy to be called your son. Which, according to the law, he wasn't. And think about that. Like according to the law of the land, according to the way the community looked at him, he actually gave up his right to be called a son. So here's this guy, this man, he's like, I'm going to go home. And I'm going to ask if I can be a servant in my father's house. And think about all of these ideas of what is this servant. There's dishonor that he brought on his dad. Dishonoring him by saying, I want you dead. There's shame that he brought on his father. Shame that says that the whole countryside around his father knew what his son had did and the shame it brought on the family. It was wasted. He not only took the money, he wasted it. And he hated his father enough to say, I don't want to be called your son anymore. So he completely rebelled against his father, completely went against him, completely despised him and rebelled and rejected against him. Now, we can see the point of this story already in our own lives, right? We understand that, yes, if this is a story about God and us, God is our Father, right? He created us. He made us. He gives us breath to breathe each day. He gives us the ability to live, right? And yet, we find ourselves rebelling against God. I find myself rebelling against God. And so we have this understanding, okay, yeah, wow, we've walked away from God. But let's look at God's response, the Father's response. This is quite beautiful. So in verse 20 it says, and he arose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, so you can imagine, dad lives maybe on the farm or something, maybe there's a countryside, he looks out, and a long ways off he sees his son. And the father saw him and felt compassion. That's powerful. Not anger, not hatred, not rejection, felt compassion. And he ran and embraced him and kissed him. Have you ever seen the Queen of England run? No. I bet she has not ran in her entire life. Well, maybe not. Maybe like since she was 12. Right? Why? Because it's very undignified for royalty to run. It's very undignified for them to run. And in this culture at this time, Very undignified for elderly people to run. Especially because you've seen pictures, right? Or maybe you acted in the nativity scene when you were younger, right? For Christmas, you have the long robe, right? So you can imagine the dad sees his son, grabs his robe, hikes it up, and just starts running, right? It's very undignified. And it's a kind of a comical picture in our head. He has his sandals. Have you ever tried to run in sandals, right? Sometimes they flop. So he's there flopping in sandals with his robe pulled up to his knees, running towards his son. Yet he didn't care. He didn't care. He was moved by such compassion and love for his son that immediately when he saw him, he couldn't help himself. He had to run to him. He embraced him, kissed him, welcomed him home. And the son said to him, he started his little speech, right? He had the speech prepared. He said, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." But before he could finish, the father said to his servant, "Bring quickly the best robe. Put it on him. Put a ring on his hand, showing status. Shoes on his feet. Bring the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate the best food. For my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." And they began to celebrate. What? Because think about the son. The son showed dishonor. The father showed honor. He said, "Bring the best robe. Bring the ring to put on his finger." The son brought shame to his father. But the father said, "No, bring respect. Put shoes on his feet." The son showed such hatred and bitterness towards his father. The father said, "I'm going to show you love." The son wasted all the gifts or the money that his dad gave him, and the father gave him gifts. So the father responded in the exact opposite of what the son deserved and what the son has shown. But let's take a look at this story from a different perspective. So there's actually two perspectives we can see this story. So it says actually at the beginning of the chapter, before Jesus starts telling these stories, it says the tax collectors and the sinners. These were, again, the most hated people. Tax collectors, they were stealing from their own people. The Roman army had come, were oppressing them, subjecting them to slavery. Tax collectors sold out their own people and stabbed them in the back. They were the most rejected and hated people. Sinners were all drawing near to him. And the Pharisees, the good guys, right, the religious people, the ones who did everything right, who followed all the rules, they grumbled and said, "This man receives sinners and eats with them. This man welcomes in the sinners." And so Jesus told him this parable. Now some of it, so there's two ways. Jesus was actually speaking to the Pharisees. He was telling the story to the Pharisees. And we'll get into the other brother. Because some of you may have been a prodigal. And we've all been prodigals in our lives with God, right? Because we've all made mistakes. We've all sinned. We've all did things that were wrong. And we all needed to come back and say, "God, I need your forgiveness." And God welcomed us in. No matter what we did, no matter what we thought, no matter what word we spoke, action we did, we come back and God welcomes us in, embraces us. However, we are also, I grew up in a Christian home. You guys are growing up going to church, going to Sunday school, right? Your parents drag you to church every Sunday. And so maybe we have a little bit of a different experience, and maybe it's not the traditional prodigal son, right? Maybe we didn't go out and do some of these terrible things, right? Maybe we still try to be good. We still go to church, right? We try to do the right things. Maybe that's more of our experience. But that's why there's another brother. So in verse 25 it says, "Now his older son was in the field." So notice the contrast. Younger son, "Dad, I wish you were dead. I want my money now. I'm going to go party." Older son, he's working in the field. That's the contrast. And he also came and drew near to the house. So he's working all day, probably 14, 15 hours a day out in the field in the hot sun, dawn till dusk, right? He comes towards the house and he hears music playing. And he hears people dancing and having a party. And he called one of the servants and he said, "What's going on? Like, why wasn't I invited to the party? What do these things mean?" 27, "And he said to him, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he had received him back safe and sound.'" And this is the brother's response. "He was angry and refused to go in." He's angry and refused to go in. Kind of makes sense, right? Like, he was the one that was faithful. He's the one that went out in the field day after the day. He's the one who respected his dad. He's the one who brought honor on the family by being the good son. He's the one that did everything right. And here comes his brother who screwed everything up, and they throw a party for him. So he's angry. He doesn't want to go into the party. So his father comes out and treats him, tells him to come in. Verse 29, but he answered his father, look, these many years I have served you. I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. You never threw a party for me. But when this son of yours comes, who has devoured his property, your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him. I did all this right. You never threw a party for me. You never celebrated me. You never made me feel welcome and at home. I wonder if we feel like this with God sometimes, right? Maybe in your life you kind of like, well, maybe I've gone to church every Sunday or most every Sundays. I try to obey my parents. I try to do what's right. Yeah, I'm not perfect, right? But I'm obedient, right? I do what's right. But God feels distant. Christianity feels blah. Like, it's just something I do, right? It's not this beautiful celebration where God is like joyfully celebrating us and we're having this party because we believe in Jesus. It's kind of like, well, I'm just doing the work. Where is the joy that was promised, that Jesus promised us? Where is the celebration? Where's the peace? Where's the beautiful joy of following Jesus? This is what the father says to him. This is great. Because the older son had a right to be angry. He said, I've been obedient, honored, diligent, followed all the rules. But this is what he said. He said, son, you are always with me. And all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for your brother was dead and alive, and is alive. He was lost and is found. So what does this mean? You are always with me. You always had everything that is mine. All that is mine is yours. What does it mean to be a Christian? It means we're adopted into God's family. All that God has is ours in that sense. The love that God has for Jesus, his only begotten son, is the love he has for us. The beauty and joy and peace of God is ours. See, the Pharisees, they were doing everything right. They were obeying the rules. They were following the laws. They were trying to be the best they can be, but they were missing out on the joy. They were missing out on the peace of God, the love of God. There was so much more that they could have experienced. And they were looking at these sinners, and they were looking at these tax collectors, and they were saying, you're eating with them, you're enjoying them, you're welcoming them, you're embracing them, you're loving them. We're the ones that are the religious ones. We're the ones that do everything right, that are obedient. And so let's look at this. So let's think about this story in those two brothers and ask ourselves, what child am I? Which child are you? Now, again, some of you, it's not probably very rare in this group to have someone like go out and like run away and rebel against their parents in that way. But maybe we have a lot of older brothers in the group, right? Maybe you've tried hard. Maybe you've tried to do your best at school. Maybe you've tried to do your best at church, go to church. Maybe you tried to obey your parents as best you can. And maybe you tried to be a good Christian, right? You think, well, what does it mean to be a Christian? Well, I'll try to be that. I'll try to be the best Christian I can be. But then maybe you're kind of saying, yeah, but Christianity, what does it even mean? What is it even for? Maybe you're not experiencing the peace and love, the beauty of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. Maybe you've just experienced I got to go to church again. Okay, fine. Oh, I got to go read my Bible. Maybe. Okay, fine. Maybe you've just experienced Christianity, the relationship with Jesus, with God as Father, at this kind of, well, maybe if I just got to do the hard work and just do the things that are right. And that's not what God has for us. God as our Father is the Father who looks at the prodigal son, the ones who walked away. Whenever we make mistakes, we experience some of this, who go off and then we experience the consequences of our mistakes, right? We do something and we're like, yep, I knew that was wrong and I'm experiencing the consequences right now. And we turn to God and God welcomes us home. Like a loving Father, embraces us, honors us, It says there is no shame, there is no hatred, there is no bitterness. God is not angry. He just welcomes us. That's who our Father is. And then also, He is the Father who, maybe we've been doing the right thing, trying to do the right thing, trying to follow the rules, try to be the good Christian, the good boy, the good girl, right? We've been trying to do that. He's the Father that says, yes, but it's not just about doing all of these tasks or doing these things. All that I have is yours. There's this abundant relationship you can have with God that's more than just, went to church, check. Read my Bible, check. I did the right thing in this situation, check. It's more than that. It's about a relationship with God the Father who loves us, who embraces us, who honors us, who makes us a part of His family. And that is the beautiful relationship that God is calling to us, calling us into.